In this video, I'm going to change the engine oil and the transmission oil in my 2015 Honda CRF250X. This process is the same for 2005 to 2017 CRF250X, as well as 2004 to 2009 CRF250R. It's also very similar for other CRF models from Honda. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove my skid plate by removing this 10mm bolt. If you still have the stock white guards on here, you'll need to remove this one from this side with the same bolt. And before you drain the engine oil, you're going to want to warm up the engine for a few minutes. And this bike has separate engine oil and transmission oil, so we'll need to drain those separately. But first we're going to work on the engine oil. And the engine oil drain is right there. So now I'm going to remove that bolt. I like to drain the oil into a clear container so I can inspect it and see what it looks like. I recently ran this bike in a race, and that's really why I'm changing the oil. It really wasn't time for it, but I just wanted to see what the oil looked like after a race, and it still looks really, really clean. This is a Moose Racing oil change stand, and this stand comes in really handy for changing oil in bikes, especially when you've got the drains underneath like this one. I'll put a link to this stand in the description if you're interested in that. Now I'm going to reinstall the drain bolt. Now I'm going to remove the oil filter by removing these two 8mm bolts. The top bolt is a long one, the bottom bolt is a short one. You can't really get them mixed up when you put it back in, it won't go together wrong. You'll notice there's a spring on this end of the filter, on the engine, the side that goes into the engine. And then there's a gasket, a rubber gasket, on the side that goes onto this piece. So take note of how that goes together. So you're going to reuse this spring, and I like to put a dab of grease in this hole just to make sure that spring stays in place when I put it in. There's a little indentation inside here that spring goes into, and you don't want that to fall. You don't want the spring to fall out of place when you're putting the filter in. So I'll put just a dab of grease in that hole, and that'll hold that spring in place when I insert it. You also want to put a little oil on this rubber gasket right here, and then put that onto your cover. You'll need to inspect this O-ring right here, make sure that's still good. If it's not, replace it. And you can insert all of that into the opening. The long screw goes in the top, and the short one goes in the bottom. Now don't over tighten these bolts. These are stainless steel bolts going into aluminum, so these would be pretty easy to strip out. These bolts only hold the cover on. The bolts themselves don't create the seal. The O-ring creates the seal. Now the manual recommends the MA class engine oil, but I got this Pro Honda GN4 oil from Amazon, and it's actually pretty cheap, so I'll put a link to this oil in the description. That's what the manual recommends, so that's what I'm going with. Now the capacity with oil and filter change is 0.69 liters. The engine oil gets refilled here. Now I'm just going to check the initial level before I start it up. Now I'm going to start it up and check for leaks. I'm going to do a final check of the level. I'll add a little bit if I need to. A little over halfway. Right there, it looks like I need to add just a little bit. That's perfect. Before I drain the transmission oil, I'm going to move the bike to the side stand. So the transmission oil drain is on the shifter side of the bike, right there. That is the bolt you remove to drain the transmission oil. The reason I put the bike on the side stand to drain the transmission oil is because the drain plug is on the left side of the bike. So that leans the bike over and gets as much of the oil out as I can. So as I mentioned earlier, I like to drain oil into a clear container and specifically into a measuring cup because I can see the condition of the oil, but I can also see how much came out. So in case of the transmission oil on this bike, if I had a bad seal between the transmission oil and the engine oil, or the transmission oil was leaking out somewhere or something, I don't have a dipstick for that between changes, so I can tell the condition of the oil and I can see how much came out. So your used oil will tell you a lot, but you can't see that if you drain it into just a regular oil pan. So I like to do it this way, but an oil pan works too. Transmission oil recommendation on this bike is the same as the engine oil recommendation, so I'm going to use the same oil. Now I'm going to put the bike back on the stand so it'll be level. Transmission oil refill is right here behind the Kickstarter. Now I found that a funnel like this works best for this refill, and I'll try to find one of these on Amazon. If I can, I'll put a link down in the video description, but it takes a little while to refill this because the oil goes in there pretty slowly. So I found if you have a tight fitting funnel, it kind of helps you out. Otherwise, you may get oil running everywhere trying to fill it into that little bitty hole. Now I have seen videos of guys that will remove this plug right here, lay the bike over on its side, and pour the oil into the hole where that plug comes out. I always do it this way, and this is the way the manual recommends doing it, so that's the way I'll do it in the video. This is the oil level check bolt just below the water pump here. It's this bolt right here, so we're going to remove that now. So this bolt is how you check the oil level of the transmission oil. So we're going to need to slowly add oil until it comes out of that hole, and we'll know we're at the right level. Now the bike has to be level, so you're going to need the bike on a stand to do this. So now that we've got oil coming out, we know that it's at the correct level. Now I'm just going to reinstall my skid plate and I'm done. I hope this video helped you out, and if it did, please give it a like because that helps me out. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already by clicking that little circle, and watch one of these videos next. Thanks for watching.